welcome to Meet the Herders. I'm your host Harish. Meet the Herders is a series of interviews with past and present members of Ethereum cat herders. Ethereum cat herders help coordinate upgrades and improvements to Ethereum by aligning multiple teams from wallets to protocol clients. They assist individuals and teams to write EIPs and ERCs, and they inform the community as the landscape changes. Today, I'm pleased to welcome William, who is one of the earliest members of ECH. Hey, William, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, as a start, could you please introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what you have been working on?
Sure. I'm Will. I've been with the ECH since it got started. In terms of what I'm working on, so I'm primarily on the engineering side of things in the ecosystem in general. I've been a full stack Web3 engineer. I've done primarily smart contracts. Like the last bunch of years, I've been focusing on smart contract stuff, either the actual engineering implementation or leading teams, managing teams, things like that, building teams.
Awesome, thank you. And could you please go into your background on how did you get started with Ethereum?
Sure. So in 2017, I pivoted to start teaching I started teaching myself how to code. And so, I had some friends who thought it would be a good idea for me. They were kind of guiding me, things like that. And a few months in, I'd already had some interests in privacy tech and things like that. I kind of discovered Bitcoin. And then once you discovered Bitcoin, the next step in general was discovering Ethereum. So, I went back to my friends. I was like, hey, there's this cool thing called Ethereum. What do you think of it? Do you think I should look into it and whatnot? And more or less all of them, even the guy who thought I should learn how to do self-driving cars, were like, that's crazy. Just like go be a normal person. So of course, naturally, I dove headfirst into it, and I've been in the ecosystem ever since.
Yeah, I think that's like a very common route. People kind of go into Bitcoin, they learn Bitcoin, and then they discover Ethereum, because usually people try to do these harder things with the Bitcoin protocol and see that it's limited. But yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And you mentioned
is that still the route even? Like, I mean, I'm thinking 2017, like Bitcoin was kind of what you'd hear about first. I'm wondering if it still is though. Like, I mean, these days there's so many different ways in, there's so many memes. There's like, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if somebody told me they got in for Doge now, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, like then Bitcoin, I'd say, was still pretty monolithic in terms of just the crypto space in general.
True, we do have a large variety of VMs, a large variety of networks. So maybe this question, maybe I should ask a future herder, maybe 4 years down the line, how did they get started with Ethereum?
Yeah.
So after Ethereum, I guess you've also been involved in the space since 2017. And I guess my question is, what has made you stick around? Because like you mentioned, now there's like an unlimited set of options you could find yourself getting into.
I'm definitely, in terms of the blockchain space in general, I would not call myself like a Ethereum or even EVM maxi. I'm primarily in this space just because it's what I know and it's what I know well. But in terms of alternative blockchain engines, so to speak, I think there's a lot of room there for expertise, for diving in. I can't say that I think that I'm here because it's the best or the one true option or anything like that. It's the one I know the best. It's the one with the most traction. So that definitely keeps me here and things like that. But I can't say I'm necessarily like, I can't say I have a specific desire to only ever do EVM or anything like that. In terms of the whole space in general. So, I mean, it's funny, I guess I would kind of meander back to 2017. Like 2017, what everybody was selling was that everything was going to be on the blockchain. We were going to do disintermediated Facebook on the blockchain. We were going to take out Uber from Uber and have Uber on the blockchain. There was an iced tea company that managed to somehow rebrand themselves to blockchain, and I don't even know what that meant, but they made a lot of money off of it. And that promise of we're going to try and bring back an internet that belongs to the user We're going to try and make things safer, better for the people, like, for the people who are using the internet, who are using apps, products, whatnot. It still speaks to me. It still whispers in my ear, like, the potential that we've got here for trying to take this new paradigm and maybe regress some of the entrenched issues that we see in the internet and consumerism now. Can I say we've seen an awful lot of that in the last 6 years? No, but the infrastructure is still there. And I think like one of the brilliant things about it is you still could do it. You still can go full decentralized when you're building on a blockchain. And the fact that it's an infrastructure that allows that, the fact that it's such an anti-fragile and an anti-fragile network that at least carries the possibility of censorship resistance, by me is still just like a brilliant promise. And I really would love to see more work in that direction and just to be a part of it.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the industry has gone through, I guess, some of its crisis, like 2017 you mentioned, and I guess we are coming on the other side with a lot of technology which was still built during the harder times. And like you, I'm quite excited to see which future directions we take. So coming back to cat herders, how did you find yourself getting involved with the collective?
So, I mean, 2017, I was a complete noob, you know what I mean? And I was like trying to watch what was going on and everything like that, getting used to being in a space where like you could have like 3 major news items a week. I remember in more or less real time when DevOps 199 said he accidentally broke the parity multisig. But I didn't like, I was this like small nobody, you know what I mean? I went to DevCon in Prague in October of 2018 and to the Fellowship of Ethereum Magicians kind of sub-conference beforehand. And Lane Reddig, if I remember right, said then that like, people are always asking, how can I help the Ethereum Foundation? How can I like, be more of a part of like the ecosystem in general? I mean, I'd say at that time, more of us identified the EF with like actual Ethereum, core Ethereum, as it were. And he said, like, listen, you want to know what we need help doing? We need product managers. We need coordinators. We need people who can like reach out and get people moving, get things done, make sure we have readiness. And I heard that and I was like, hey, I can do that. So over the conference, I made sure that I just like, managed to find him at some point, kind of like corner and be like, hey, I really think I could help out with that. And so he said that he actually had gotten a lot more response than he had thought he would. And after Prague, he was like going to sit down and circle back and actually like try and get something off the ground. And so he recruited Hudson Jamison, and that was how the cat herders got started. So that's kind of how I was there on the ground floor.
Nice. And then if you were to look back, would you highlight some critical issues which I guess the development teams at the time were facing? So you mentioned project management was one, but were there any other issues which stick out to you?
So I don't remember Lane really diving into detail there, but I mean, I can kind of figure it out just retroactively from looking at what we were doing. One of the early things that we were doing was kind of hard fork coordination, making sure that everyone was ready for a hard fork. I don't remember if that included client teams itself. It may have for teams at least that weren't Geth and Parity, because Parity still existed back then. And but definitely apps and other things, if there were new features, things that could break, just making sure like, hey, this is happening, It's telling to me that actually through the cat herders, I was once on a call with a large like proof of work mining pool. I do not have the liberty to say which, unfortunately. And they mentioned when they were trying to give an idea of like, okay, since they're a mining pool, that means that basically what they have is they have a lot of other people with GPUs, ASICs, whatever, depending on what they're mining, that are connected to them, but they're not the ones with all the hash power. They're just pulling it together and mining with it. So to try and give us an idea about what it's like out there, they told us that in their Bitcoin operations, inevitably, whenever there was a halvening, which is when the reward per block gets halved, like 3-4 months later, people would start getting in touch with support and start yelling at them. Hey, how come I'm getting half as much now? What are you guys doing? You can't scam me. But like, that isn't just being 3-4 months late. That's missing the entire conversation beforehand. And then the next 3-4 months. So, I mean, I get the feeling, especially then, Ethereum had a lot of similarities to that. You know, there would be a hard fork and dApps would break, things would go down. People be like, oh my gosh, what on earth happened here? Like, you know, the blockchain is broken, kind of a thing. And like, no, like we've been talking about this for ages. There were all core dev calls. He could have been there, like, you know, but people just don't know. So I think a lot of it was that, and I get the feeling that that's what the original idea of decentralized project management was, just making sure the right people know this is happening. Stakeholders are updated. If there's a way to try and get that out into the public eye as best we can, great. But obviously, you're never going to get everybody. But at least trying to make sure, at least that the major things are taken care of, the major dApps, the major players are all taken care of for changes like that.
Amazing. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is it was a big initiative to open communication with like all the stakeholders, as you mentioned, and now maybe that bond is even stronger, and there's more of an exchange with these parties on how the coordination could take place and make sure the network is more safer, everyone is better informed and prepared for it.
I feel like it's kind of actually two-sided. I do feel like there is more awareness these days, and there's probably a certain higher level of professionalism when it comes to kind of almost like the sysadmin DevOps qualities of building large-scale dApps and whatnot. And I think some of that is the space just getting a bit more professional as time goes by. I do think that also the nature and cadence of hard forks have changed into a more organized format at this point, which makes them somewhat easier to anticipate. But I don't think either one of those by itself would really have gotten us to where we are now. But yeah, I definitely do feel like that's a lot less of an issue than it used to be back then. That being said, I do remember being on a prominent forum some 5 months after 1559, and a prominent name popped up on the forum yelling about 1559. What is this thing? How did this just get Lightning included? Where's the discussion? I thought this was a decentralized network. And I was like, bruh, we've been talking about this for 2 years. Like, where have you been? I still don't know where he was. Like, it's just a fascinating little tidbit to me. Like, I mean, there will always be someone who misses the conversation.
True. Could you please walk us through how your role has evolved with ECH?
That's definitely an interesting one. Let's see here. What would be the best way to kind of go through this? I would say some of what it's done is it's shifted a lot with just what the ECH has needed and what like the basic tasks facing us were. And that's had a lot of different faces over times. There were times where there was a whole time even where it looked like we might interface more directly with the EF. And there were already like, you know, there was some level of communication there that fell off the radar. I don't even remember what year that was in anymore. So a lot of it just has followed that kind of cadence. There's been, I'd say, a big turnover in terms of who's been in the ECH. Like at this point, I think Pooja and I are kind of the only two really old hands. Though you do have some of the veteran members also who like have, I'd say, a tangential relationship, like Tim Bako, who's now running the all core devs execution call, for instance. So he's he is by the EF. He's not at ECH anymore, but like, you know, he's still around, so to speak. Hudson Jamison's similar story. A few people have left the space. And just the shift in who's there and who's been around and things like that, I think has made a difference. The time I've spent getting to know the space better and kind of making the route from junior into something like a senior smart contract engineer has, I think, also contributed to that a bit as I got to understand the network better, how it works, what the needs are, and from the technical standpoint, in addition to just the comms, like social layer, so to speak, standpoint. A lot of it, I would say in the early days, I did a little bit of note taking, a lot of the tasks like coordination. So I would take a hand in that, just reaching out to people, trying to contact them, things like that. At some point in 21, if I remember right. So I had enough bandwidth from the job I was working at the time and really wanted to throw things back into like the kind of coordination, like the whole coordination ethos. And I figured I had enough experience and enough kind of a social network also to try and push just like a general coordination agenda. Anytime you're in any ecosystem, but especially a decentralized one, there's always going to be people who would benefit from knowing the right person, from knowing the right project, things like that. Just trying to find where there was something that could unstick things or make things more efficient. I think my favorite example there is one that nothing came out of. Like I can say this had absolutely no effect on anything whatsoever. But Geth as a client used to include a lot more things in it. Like it used to have a lot more of a kitchen sink. I would say they've really been on a big mission the last couple of years to try and trim it down and take out things. There used to be an entire Swarm client in Geth. And I was thinking with the way Flashbots was developing, maybe getting it enshrined in the client, it's probably something they were thinking about. But I figured, why not? Let's see if they want to talk with each other. So I reached out to Flashbots. I was like, hey, you guys want to talk with Geth? They're like, yeah. So then I went into the ETH R&D Discord. I was like, anybody from Geth here? Not an emergency. And one of the core Geth guys like hopped in DMs with me, and I was like, "Hey, would you set up a meeting with the Flashbots guys?" So he was like, "Okay." So then I just set it up. The entire story took, I think, about 15 minutes. Now it happened to be people were online, this, that, the other, but like just having someone who's kind of floating around looking for that. If everybody's in the same org, so you'd think a PM would get something like that, a TPM, I don't know what. But in a decentralized ecosystem, I feel like there was a lot of space for that. So I kind of created a role for myself then, which I worked part-time from roughly, I think, mid-21 until I started by Polygon in March 22. Just kind of like floating around looking for things like that. I also did a bit of a podcast for the ECH then. So that I would say was like the most day-to-day active that I was in the ECH. March 22, I started by Polygon and basically lost all my bandwidth. And so I went from that to basically showing up every 2 weeks for the meeting. Now, it happens to be I do think that showing up to the meeting every 2 weeks is actually, in some ways, a little bit underrated. It has definitely allowed me to just keep up with what's going on, have a little bit of a say, have that extra pair of eyes. Like the reason why you do M of N on a multi-sig is because you want a few people to take a look at the transaction, figure out if you want it to get through. You can look at the biweekly meeting like that also. It's the same kind of thing. You're doing your role as being a member, just like, hearing what's going on, maybe having an idea of something stuck, maybe being able to make the right connection, and just like, staying connected. So I'd say that's kind of been my life cycle. I've seen a lot of people kind of do the like ramp up how much they do with the ECH. It usually ends at some point when they lose some bandwidth, and usually then they exit entirely. I'm happy I've been able to keep with the ECH, even though I have had to downgrade my level of involvement since compared to like 22.
Wow, and I'm sure the team is also very happy to have your expertise on board. And I guess you've had like this amazing journey where you started from note taking to coordinating with Flashbots and building, I guess, your own trust layer. So there really is kind of like no limit to what you could get to. Even if you are doing something which is like just taking notes, I guess you get a very good beat on the ecosystem on what's coming on.
The note taking's it is actually really amazing in that sense. It can be hard to sit through ACDE. I know for myself, I have a hard time motivating myself to listen to it when I don't either need to attend as an attendee or something like that. The note taking was a great way of making sure that I would listen and that I would focus, and just having, like, as a smart contract dev, I can't say that I have protocol layer so baked into my job, but it gave me so much more awareness of just what's going on in a client, what things look like, what core devs are talking about. So yeah, keeping up with ACDE, I mean, I don't mean that to the detriment of ACDC, I'd say, like, you know, it's a really great idea for a lot of reasons, even for just a smart contract dev.
Nice. You mentioned you're also one of the multisig signers for ECH. Before we dive into it, could you like very quickly explain what a multisig is to someone who doesn't understand it?
Sure. So the basic concept of multisig in Ethereum, like on EVM architecture, as of right now, is a smart contract that basically, instead of your average transaction, or actually, you know what? Let me scratch that, start back over again. Normally, when a person opens up MetaMask or whatever wallet is their preferred method, you know, you see what you want to do, you click it in the dApp, you get the pop-up from your wallet, you click it, bam, sent out to the network, ready to get included in a block. What a multisig does and strives to do is make it so that in order anything needs to happen from a certain address, it needs more people to agree to it happening. So basically, for, you know, 0x, ABCD, whatever, let's say I'm a signer and you're a signer and Pooja's a signer. Maybe we decide we need 2 of 3. So that's the M equals 2, N equals 3. And in order for that wallet, that address to transact, it'll need some kind of approval from any 2 of the 3 of us. And that helps reduce trust assumptions. So let's say, getting ahead of myself a little bit here, let's say somebody's donated for a specific cause to the Ethereum cat herders. So, I mean, at the end of the day, how do they know I don't just, you know, hightail it and take myself that long coveted vacation somewhere deep in the Pacific? If there's other people who also need to approve the funds, well, then we'd need to collude in order for something like that to happen. So it's not perfect, but at least it increases the likelihood of trustful behavior.
Got it. And I guess my next question is, what does the multisig wallet of ECH have? Is it mainly donations, or does ECH have some tasks which are assigned by, I don't know, like EF to do? And is that what you look at before you sign the transactions out?
So usually if you know what's going on, you kind of, well, I mean, we don't have to sign for funds coming in. That's just an artifact of the EVM in general. You don't actually respond to funds being transferred in, especially ERC20 tokens. But funding in general comes from 2 different sources. There are things like grants, like Bitcoin grants, for instance, or Octant now, that have provided funding for us. Moloch DAO has provided a lot of funding in the past. And that's just generally granted to us without clause. I'll get back to what it gets spent on momentarily. There have been specific times that we were contracted, so to speak. It wasn't like an official legal agreement or anything like that, but that we were contracted to do specific tasks for funding from various entities. I don't have such a good memory on what all of them were off the top of my head. Now, circling back to what the ECH uses funds for. So starting, I don't remember exactly when. So Pooja Ranjan, who joined the ECH very shortly after its inception, basically had taken a lot of the managerial tasks on, and it was getting to the point where it was hard for her to do other things. And so she originally first made the dive into part-time and then even to full-time to running the ECH. So when she moved over to part-time, I think that was actually the first time we had a paid role. And there had been conversation about that, about whether ECH should ever have funds, if it should remain completely volunteer and whatnot. I would say at that point, it really became clear. I actually think I was one of the big naysayers then. I don't remember the conversation. I'm pretty sure that I actually pushed no funds. but it became clear to the supermajority of people there, and I certainly agree with it at this point, that it wasn't going to be possible to keep someone who could actually keep things running and keep the lights on if it wasn't actually a paid position that they could focus on. So since then, there have been paid roles. I think that might be the only role, so to speak, that's paid. I was paid when I did full part-time. Though again, I cut that off in March 23, March 22, sorry. And of course, all that data is available on chain. ECH, what is it? We don't have ECH.eth anymore. We have ETHCatHerders.eth is the multi-sig address in case anybody wants to check the chain on us. The note-taking, as in note-taking for ACDE, ACDC, and I don't even remember what other meetings at this point we officially cover. So that's been bountied for a very long time. That money might come from the EF, actually. I don't remember where the money for that comes from. I don't remember if that's straight out of grants or if there's something specific for it. You'd have to ask Pooja. I think it comes out of the big pool, like just whatever funding we've brought in, but it could be there's something specific for that. I don't remember. So there's that, and occasionally there's other bounty tasks also, like getting our website up, things like that.
Right. So the wallet is basically funding most of the day-to-day operations via using bounties or paying some individuals who are contributing like a large amount of their time towards running of the ECH. Now moving, I guess, the conversation slightly.
Maybe I will just throw in one thing there right before you do that then.
Yeah.
There has been some conversation about maybe opening up new ideas. Like we've been open to that, like maybe being a part of hackathons or other things, either to help spread awareness or just to help get out there more. I'm not aware of any time where we've pulled off something like that yet, though I could be mistaken. It could be there has been a hackathon that we were a part of or something like that.
You're right. Good to note. So I guess what I was going at was moving the conversation slightly different. Is there any particular EIP or ERC which you're kind of looking forward to be in production? I mean, hey, if you were a runner, I would ask you what are your favorite pair of shoes, running shoes. But since we work in Ethereum, I thought I'd just ask everyone: is there any particular upgrade you're kind of looking forward to, and what would that enable?
That's interesting. There's a lot of very interesting a lot of interesting stuff going on right now. Now, one thing I would say is I do get the feeling that a lot of times smart contract devs find themselves a little bit removed from the EIPs and ERCs. And to some degree, even I would say one of the most exciting developments in EIP land recently has been splitting the EIPs and ERCs, which I think is a really, really good move. I do understand that there are some people who weren't very into it. At the same time, I'm really glad that it moved forward. I have not mentioned EIP editing as another thing that the cat herders are a part of to date, but Pooja especially really pushed heavier involvement with the EIPs. I was heavily active in that before I moved over to Polygon, and again lost more or less all of my bandwidth. I even got offered EIP editor then, like the official position. Something I will say for anyone who is listening, who is listening to this now, you do not need to be an EIP editor to contribute to the EIPs. The EIPs and ERCs in general desperately need people who can quality check, who can grammar check, who can do the pedantic tasks of saying like, hey, look, there's this template here. This doesn't follow it here. Please don't do this. Please cut out this part. This isn't like, and just the little things like the little clerical work like that. And you totally do not need to be an EIP editor to do that. It is completely permissionless. All you need literally is a GitHub account and to just make a comment. At some point, Sam Wilson, before he was an EIP editor, I seem to remember him telling me that like people would ask him in threads like, oh, wait, are you one of the editors? He'd be like, no, I'm just reading your EIP and this is what needs to happen. And then they made him into an EIP editor, so you can kind of see where that went. But in any event, so then like for me, I got a very, very strong feeling of one of the reasons they asked me to be involved then even was that most of the editors really didn't have much to do with the application layer and smart contracts. And so many of the proposals were off in ERC land. And it's a different style because you don't need the ERCs the way Core needs EIPs. In order to be a canonical Ethereum client, you need to follow the EIPs that are canonically a part of a Core EVM client. But if you're writing a smart contract no one can tell you that smart contract does not run on the EVM network if it doesn't, work with ERC20 or whatever the case is. It could be a lot of apps won't work with it. It's a great idea to use ERC20. They're all going to make fun of you if you don't, if it's a fungible token. But at the same time, like nothing breaks. The code compiles. And it makes the ERCs in many ways fundamentally different. And I am happy to see them split off because I think it will allow each one to better get the attention that they kind of need. In terms of upcoming EIPs, it'll be very interesting to see what EOF does to smart contract development. I will confess that I'm saying some of that out of ignorance. I don't have a good idea about how it will change. Like how it will change smart contract development. It could entirely be that to the engineer's end with Solidity, Viper, or their preferred weapon of choice, that not much changes. And it's just, all of the language creators who have to all of a sudden make their code compile down into this newly structured target. But it will be interesting to see what can be done with that and how that changes, engineering in general, I would say. 1153 is an easy answer also. Uniswap v4 has already signaled very heavily that there is a lot that you can do with transient storage in terms of gas savings and then being able to do increasingly complex things at less gas. So it'll be interesting to see what that opens up also. Other than that, can't say I've got much.
Right, brilliant. I'll be sure to include links to these so our audience
cool.
can take a look at it. I guess I just wanted to catch up on like one of the things you mentioned and I guess a term you used, which was Do-ocrasy. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
I think I get to credit Lane with that one. I think that was a big Lane phrase. The way he saw the ECH at first was a do-ocracy, which is if you want it done, just do it. And definitely, I would say it has remained very, very much like that. The people who have been the most successful there had an idea of what they wanted to do and did it. And the sky's the limit, so to speak. So, for instance, in 21 and early 22, where I was putting a lot more hours into the ECH, it was all just based off of whatever I could figure out to do, like whatever I could perceive. Now that does pick up its own inertia because the more you get out there, the more people know, the more people will find you also. So you end up kind of raising a flag also. But even now, I would say the ECH has a massive amount of space for anyone who can self-define tasks and self-execute.
Awesome. So now some questions which are not Ethereum related.
Sure.
So I'd like to ask you, are there any causes and interests you are passionate about outside of Ethereum?
It is interesting that the way that I got into Ethereum was through privacy tech. Decentralization and privacy still matter a lot to me. It's interesting, back in the earlier days, people used to talk about how, Bitcoin and blockchains are more private, which, it's true, but it's not in a lot of ways. It's true, you don't need to get KYC'd to own Bitcoin, except for the fact that 98% of the time you do, because you're going to almost certainly have to go through a centralized exchange. You're going to have to KYC to them. And of course, the chain itself is public. So yeah, it's true. There's Monero, there's Zcash, there's all of the different things that you can do. But in a way, privacy on blockchains can be shockingly bad, because it's there and it's there forever. The FBI has actually uncharacteristically made funny jokes about that. On one occasion, someone there, I don't remember who, was quoted as saying, "We love investing in blockchain. You know what we call it internally when we're investing in blockchain tools? Prosecution futures."
Wow.
Because essentially the better they understand the chain, they can go back all the way to 2010 and don't forget the years that Silk Road was dominant on Bitcoin also. It's still all sitting on Bitcoin. All it takes is one slip up and they can identify someone.
True, and I think there are also so many tools now, right, to do forensic analytics. What are your thoughts on that? Sorry to interrupt you, but I just also wanted to ask you.
I can't do better than actually quoting somebody else. I was once in a Discord get-together with one of the higher-ups in Chainalysis, which for people who are not aware is a firm that is dedicated to tools like these and tends to work closely with the US government. So I asked him what his thoughts were. And he gave me a very Austrian economics answer. He said that the way he sees it is it's inevitable that as time goes on and a technology gets more traction, that privacy does not just become another thing that has a value. And it will always gravitate towards the equilibrium that if you have the money or you have the technical know-how, then you can, so to speak, afford privacy and otherwise not. And he saw that as such an inevitability that he didn't really see himself as disturbing that equilibrium. Do I agree with that as an ideology? I don't know. Like, I suppose probably I do not. However, the unfortunate nature of open markets does seem to trend in that direction. And definitely another thing that we see is that privacy oftentimes comes at a loss to UX and sometimes to actual performance. Not always. You get every now and then incredible apps like WhatsApp that actually has very robust encryption until that gets broken by the people who bought it, at least. And is actually like, ergonomic to use. It is fun to use. But a lot of times creating something like that with privacy deeply baked into it involves certain levels of trade-offs. I get the feeling that sometimes this even doesn't get promoted enough about like among people who talk about privacy. Everybody loves to complain about how much data Google is harvesting from them, but then they'll talk about how YouTube's recommendation algorithm is great. Those two things are both sitting on the same end of the scale. It is difficult, not impossible, but at least difficult to create such a good recommendation algorithm without blatantly harvesting large amounts of data. Are there things that you can do? Absolutely. Could Google do them? Absolutely. But I mean, if you think about it, YouTube's interested in maximizing their revenue. What incentive do they have to dedicate entire teams to reinvent their architecture in a way that it's saving user data that like only a slim percent of the population is complaining about? So, I mean, to some degree, you end up with the trade-off. Like, are you willing to ditch the recommendations? Like, are you willing for them not to have your data because you won't give it to them also? I mean, when it comes to blockchain, I think there's a lot of similar things going on. Like if you really, really, really want to be private on the blockchain in general, like there's a lot of things that it just gets a lot harder to do. So you'll see the professionals talk about the trade-offs. There are things that are reasonably obfuscated. There's almost always one of the things you'll hear people talking about is differentiating between nation states and individuals. Like for instance, one classic way of getting a fresh address, like, you don't like, and again, I'm definitely not talking about nefarious behavior. Let's say that there is some like chibi anime NFT that I think is really awesome, but I am embarrassed to admit publicly. So I don't want it sitting on main. I don't want it my primary address. So I want a fresh address, something that you can't look at and after 5 seconds on Etherscan figure out was me because I funded it directly from my wallet 2 minutes beforehand. So sending up to a centralized exchange and then back to a fresh address is a classic way to do it. Of course, the exchange knows you. They're the ones who sent the money for you. And of course, you should assume from that more or less any major government in the world should know too, either because they can ask nicely or because they don't need to. But at the end of the day, your average person looking at Etherscan won't know it's you. And then there's layers on layers on layers on layers on that too, about like, how well you can do it. If you really want to have fun, you can see like some of the things. I saw one person saying, what was it? Local Bitcoin mixer to Monero back to Bitcoin through a mixer and then bridge to EVM was their recommended route for having a clean Ethereum address. Okay, good luck.
Yeah, I think it's like a very difficult area of how much privacy is okay. I mean, obviously the blockchain makes everything public.
Right.
On one hand, you have I mean, if you do get hacked, exchange gets hacked, I think forensic tools kind of make some of these things easier. There are ways you can block addresses, but then there's always this worry: are they also looking at what newspaper I'm paying for? Is this data going to get harvested and used in a way I'm not sure about? So yeah, I think it's a hard one to call. But thank you for sharing your views on it.
Yeah, to some degree, that's always the problem, though, like you're saying. Like, you always want privacy for the good guys, but not for the bad guys. It's just that the problem is you can't really discriminate. You know what I mean? Because at that point, you're giving someone the tools to discriminate between good guys and bad guys, and that usually gets a whole lot worse.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess the last question is, well, not the question, but I'd just like to invite you to share any message you have for the audience, anything you want to plug, you want to share. I mean, like the stage is yours.
I'd probably circle around to what you were talking about do-ocracies before, which is, I mean, at the end of the day, Ethereum is a decentralized network. And if you're somebody who's sitting on the sidelines and you're looking in, at the hallowed halls of core devs and those cool people on Twitter who have 50,000 followings and everything like that, understand that you can be just as much a part of everything as they are. And every year or two, you'll see a bunch of people who up until then had not even been in the ecosystem, who all of a sudden just get catapulted on the slings of outrageous fortune, so to speak, into places where they're doing stuff. And the reason why is because they did something. They opened their mouth, they put out a blog post, they got in touch with the people, they were willing to ask the question out loud, they were willing to make a proposal. And part of the nature of the way Ethereum itself is set up basically means that should more or less always be around. I mean, of course, things could ossify into some kind of wild, authoritarian, I don't know what, but definitely the way things are now, anyone can get a seat at the table. It's remarkably easy even. So, that's it. You just got to get out there and you got to do it. And I would highly recommend for any of you who have an idea or have something they'd want to see done in the ecosystem, or even can't figure out why things aren't done a different way, speak up about it. Find someone to talk to. See if you can get it done. Maybe you're what the ecosystem's been waiting for. So I would say that would definitely be my one big call to action.
Thank you so much. I think it's like a great thought to end it on. Just get out there and support do-ocracy. So William, thank you very much for spending the time and chatting to me about your ECH history and your interests. I would also like to thank our audience for tuning in. I hope you found it as insightful, and hope to see you in the next one. Thank you again, William.
Thanks.